I'm Bobby. Sitting here now, looking at my two dogs, Max and Luna, I'm reminded of the terrifying yet life-changing event that took place a few years ago. It all started when I saw two police officers escorting a man in handcuffs out of my house. His eyes met mine for a split second, and a chill ran down my spine. That look on his face was so unsettling, as if he knew me, even though I'd never seen him before. 6 months prior, I'd bought my first house in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Washington. After a rough divorce, this house was my fresh start. It was an old-fashioned home built in the 1930s, with beautiful hardwood floors that creaked with every step and large windows that let in the warm morning light. The second-floor attic was huge, and I had big plans to turn it into a home office where I could work as a freelance writer without distractions. I lived alone, but I wasn't truly alone. I had Max, my 5-year-old golden retriever. He'd been my loyal companion for the past 4 years. My younger sister, Lily, lived about 2.5 hours away. She was a kindergarten teacher, and we talked on the phone every day. Whenever something went wrong, big or small, she was the first person I called. My life had fallen into a comfortable routine. I'd wake up around 7:30, take Max for a long walk around the neighborhood. When we got back, I'd make coffee while he sprawled out on the kitchen floor. I'd work at my desk in the living room until lunchtime. Then, we'd spend time in the backyard. Max would chase after squirrels, and I'd sit on the porch steps, enjoying the fresh air while working on my laptop. In the evenings, we'd relax on the couch together. Max would curl up next to me as I read or watched TV. It was simple, peaceful, and exactly what I needed. Max was the most well-behaved dog. He had his little quirks, but he was very predictable. He loved our daily routine as much as I did. Every morning, we'd take the same walk route, and every evening, he'd lie in the same spot on the couch. He was friendly with the neighbors and great with kids. He never caused any trouble. But then, one Tuesday evening in late September, everything changed. The weather was perfect, that early fall temperature where you just need a light jacket. Max was his normal self during our walk, sniffing every tree, wagging his tail at passing cyclists. But when we got back to the house and I opened the front door, Max stopped dead in his tracks. He planted his feet firmly on the porch and refused to move forward. At first, I thought he was just being playful, maybe wanting to stay outside a bit longer. I laughed and gently tugged on his leash, but he didn't budge. I walked inside and called him, but he just sat on the porch and stared at me. I went to the kitchen and grabbed his favorite treats, the ones that usually made him do tricks. I held them at the doorway, but he just looked at the treats, then at me, and backed away. I tried everything, his squeaky toy, his food bowl, even his water dish. Max just whined softly and lay down on the porch, his eyes fixed on the open doorway as if there was an invisible wall he couldn't cross. After 20 minutes of trying, I gave up. I sat down next to him on the porch steps, completely confused. Max rested his head on my lap and let out a long, heavy sigh. He didn't seem sick or scared, he seemed protective, like he was trying to keep me from going inside. But that didn't make sense. We'd only been gone for about 45 minutes. Nothing could have changed in that short time. The next morning, Wednesday, Max still wouldn't enter the house. I'd spent the whole night on the porch with him, dozing off in short, uncomfortable intervals while he stayed alert, his ears twitching at every sound. When the sun came up, I tried again to coax him inside, but he backed away from the door as if it was dangerous. I was exhausted, confused, and starting to worry that something was seriously wrong with him. While making coffee in the kitchen, I called Lily, keeping the front door open so I could see Max on the porch. She answered on the second ring, her voice still groggy from staying up late to prepare lesson plans. I explained the situation, and she immediately suggested that Max might be sick or traumatized by something inside the house. Maybe there was a dead animal, a gas leak, or some smell that only he could detect. That made sense to me, so I spent the next hour searching every room in the house. I checked under the furniture, inside the closets, and behind the appliances. I even opened the basement door and went down with a flashlight. Everything was exactly as I'd left it the day before. There were no strange odors, no signs of animals, and no leaks. I opened all the windows in the house, thinking fresh air might help if there was a scent bothering him. When I called Max, he approached the doorway, stretched his neck forward to sniff, and then immediately flattened his ears against his head and backed away. The look in his eyes was no longer confusion, it was fear. By Wednesday afternoon, I knew I needed professional help. I loaded Max into my car, which he jumped into happily, and drove to our vet's office. Dr. Emily Green had been Max's vet since I adopted him, and she knew his entire medical history. I explained the situation while she examined him thoroughly. She checked his heart rate, his breathing, looked in his ears and eyes, and felt his stomach and joints. After 20 minutes of tests, Dr. Green smiled and told me that Max was in perfect health. His vitals were strong, he showed no signs of pain or illness, and he was responding normally to every physical test. She suggested it might be a behavioral issue, possibly anxiety triggered by some change in our routine that I hadn't noticed. She recommended giving Max a few days to adjust and monitoring him for any physical symptoms that might develop. I left the office feeling more frustrated than reassured. If nothing was wrong with Max, then why was he acting this way? Thursday was my breaking point. I'd been sleeping in my car in the driveway for 2 nights, only going inside to shower and grab clean clothes while Max waited in the yard. My work was piling up because I couldn't focus. I was running on maybe 3 hours of sleep. Lily called and offered to drive up immediately, but I told her I could handle it. I didn't want to admit how scared I was, not of Max, but of not understanding what was happening. That evening, something changed. As the sun was setting, Max stood at the edge of the driveway, staring up at the second-floor window of my house, the small window that looked into the attic. He started growling, a low, rumbling sound that came from deep in his chest. I'd never heard him make that noise before. The hair along his back stood straight up, and his body went rigid. I followed his gaze up to the attic window, but all I saw was darkness behind the glass. The street was quiet, and the neighbors were inside having dinner. There I stood in my driveway with my dog growling at my own house as if it was haunted. On Friday morning, I decided to call an animal behavioral specialist. Before I could even look up the phone numbers, I heard a car door slam. 2 people in business casual clothes were walking up my driveway. The woman held up a badge and introduced herself as Detective Sarah Hill and her partner as Detective Tom Miller. They asked if I was Bobby, if I lived alone, and if I'd noticed anything unusual lately. When I told them about Max refusing to enter the house for 4 days, their faces changed completely. Detective Hill looked at her partner, then back at me, and asked for permission to search my house, specifically the attic. My heart dropped into my stomach. Detective Hill must have seen the color drain from my face because she immediately asked if we could sit down. We sat outside on the porch steps with Max between us, and she explained everything in a calm, steady voice that somehow made the words even more terrifying. They'd been tracking a suspect for 3 weeks. A man named Victor Reed, who was wanted for multiple breaking and entering incidents across our county. He wasn't just an ordinary burglar. He had a disturbing pattern of hiding in the vacant spaces of homes where people lived alone, mostly women. He'd hide in attics, basements, crawl spaces, anywhere he could stay concealed for days at a time. He'd watch the residents, learn their routines, and in 2 confirmed cases, he'd assaulted his victims when he decided the time was right. Detective Miller added that a neighbor 2 streets over had reported seeing someone matching Victor's description climbing onto a roof near my property 4 days ago on Tuesday afternoon. They'd spent the past day reviewing security footage from homes in the area and found grainy video of a man entering through my attic vent while I was out walking Max. That was around 5:15 in the evening, right before Max refused to come inside. I couldn't breathe. My hands started shaking so badly that Detective Hill gently took my phone from me when I tried to hold it. She asked if there was someone I could call, someone who could come stay with me. I managed to whisper Lily's name, and Detective Miller dialed the number for me. When Lily answered, I couldn't form words. Detective Hill took the phone and explained the situation in that same calm voice while I sat there, trying to process what I was hearing. Someone had been living in my attic for 4 days. Someone had been in my house above my bedroom while I slept in my car outside because my dog knew. Max knew. Detective Hill handed my phone back, and I heard Lily's voice, high and frightened, telling me she was getting in her car right now and would be there in 5 hours. I just nodded even though she couldn't see me. Detective Hill pulled out a consent form and explained they needed my permission to search the property. Her hand was already reaching for her radio to call for backup before I even finished signing my name. Within minutes, 4 more police cars arrived. Officers in uniform gathered on my lawn while the detectives explained the layout of my house. I told them the attic access was in the hallway upstairs, a pulled-down ladder that I'd only used once when I first moved in. Detective Miller asked me to stay outside no matter what I heard. Max pressed against my leg, his warm, solid body the only thing keeping me grounded. I watched through my front window as the officers entered my house with their hands on their weapons. I could hear their footsteps moving through the rooms below, and then the distinct creak of the stairs as they went up to the second floor. The house I'd loved 6 months ago suddenly looked like a stranger's home, a place where something terrible had been happening while I lived my normal life, just feet away from danger. I heard the metallic scrape of the attic ladder being pulled down. Flashlight beams swept across the attic window from inside. There were voices, sharp commands that I couldn't make out clearly, and then more movement, heavy footsteps above, then coming down the stairs, faster than they'd gone up. Detective Hill stood and positioned herself between me and the house. More police cars arrived with their lights flashing, but no sirens. Max's tail started wagging slightly for the first time in 4 days. He was still tense, but something had shifted in his body language. I realized he was relaxing because he could sense that whatever had been in our house was about to be removed. My dog had been trying to protect me this entire time, and I'd spent 4 days confused instead of terrified, which maybe was a blessing because if I'd known what was really happening, I don't think I could have survived the fear. The front door opened, and 2 officers emerged with a man in handcuffs between them. He was thin, in his late 30s, with greasy dark hair and clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. His eyes scanned the street as they walked him to the patrol car. And for just a second, his gaze landed on me. I felt ice run through my veins. That look wasn't angry or scared, it was familiar, like he knew me, like we'd met before, even though I'd never seen this man in my entire life. Detective Miller pushed his head down as they loaded him into the back seat, and I realized I was holding my breath. Max let out a soft whine and licked my hand. Detective Hill waited until the patrol car drove away before she came over and sat down next to me on the porch steps. She took a deep breath and asked if I was ready to hear what they'd found. I wasn't sure I was, but I nodded anyway because I needed to know. She explained that the man's name was Victor Reed, 38 years old, and he'd been living in my attic since Tuesday evening. He had a sleeping bag tucked into the corner behind some boxes, empty food wrappers from energy bars and chips, plastic bottles that he'd been using as a makeshift bathroom. But the worst part, the part that made Detective Hill pause and choose her words carefully, was the notebook. Victor had been keeping detailed notes about me, what time I woke up each morning, when I showered, how long I worked at my desk, what I made for meals, when I went to bed. He'd been watching me through the gaps in the attic floorboards and the air vents. The attic in those old houses isn't completely sealed off from the rooms below, and he'd found the perfect spots where he could see into my bedroom and the hallway. He knew my entire routine better than I knew it myself. Detective Hill showed me a photocopy of one page from his notebook, and my stomach turned. He'd written my schedule hour by hour for 3 full days. He knew I talked to Lily every morning at 8:30. He knew I ate lunch at 12:30. He knew I went to bed around 11 o'clock and read for 30 minutes before turning off the light. Detective Miller joined us and added that they'd also found a knife in Victor's backpack along with zip ties and duct tape. He pulled out his own notebook and explained that Victor had done this before to 2 other women in neighboring towns over the past year. One woman had been assaulted in her own home and barely escaped. The other had woken up to find him standing in her bedroom. Both cases were still open investigations because Victor had disappeared before the police could arrest him. They'd been trying to track him down for months. Detective Miller's voice got quieter when he said that Victor had written plans in his notebook for Friday night, after I would have gone to sleep. He didn't tell me specific details of those plans, and I didn't ask. The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. If Max hadn't refused to enter the house, if I'd forced him inside or taken him to a kennel, thinking he was being difficult, I would have been alone in that house for 4 nights with a dangerous man living 10 feet above my bed, planning when and how to attack me. I couldn't hold it together anymore. I wrapped my arms around Max and sobbed into his fur. He stayed perfectly still and let me cry, occasionally licking my face like he understood I needed him. A car pulled up fast, and Lily jumped out before it even fully stopped. She ran across the lawn and pulled both of us into her arms. We sat there on the porch, the 3 of us holding each other while police officers moved in and out of my house collecting evidence. Detective Hill told me I'd need to stay somewhere else for a few days while they processed the crime scene. I couldn't imagine ever stepping foot in that house again. Max wagged his tail fully for the first time since Tuesday, sensing somehow that the danger had passed, and I was finally safe. I stayed with Lily for 2 weeks. I couldn't even bring myself to drive past my house during that time. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that man in my attic watching me through the floorboards, listening to my phone conversations, learning everything about my life while I had no idea he existed. Lily took time off work to stay with me those first few days because I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up multiple times each night in a panic, convinced someone was in the room. Max slept pressed against me every single night, and his presence was the only thing that helped me feel even remotely safe. The police investigation moved quickly once they arrested Victor. Detectives found evidence in his belongings that connected him to 4 other cases, not just the 2 they'd originally known about. 4 women who had experienced the same nightmare I almost experienced. 2 of them came forward after hearing about the arrest and shared their stories with investigators. Both mentioned that their pets had acted strangely before the attacks. One woman's cat had refused to stop meowing at the ceiling. Another woman's dog had barked at the basement door for days. They'd both dismissed it as animal behavior and never imagined the real reason behind it. After 2 weeks, I knew I had to go back. Lily drove me to the house, and we walked through it together with Max leading the way. The police had finished processing the scene and removed all of Victor's belongings, but I could still feel his presence somehow. The attic felt especially wrong. Lily helped me that entire first weekend. We installed a complete security system with cameras on every corner of the house, motion sensors on all the doors and windows, and an alarm that would alert the police directly if it was triggered. We changed every single lock, and I had a contractor come out to permanently seal the attic vent from the outside, so no one could ever enter that way again. I couldn't afford to convert the attic into an office anymore after paying for all the security upgrades. But I didn't care. I never wanted to go up there again. Anyway, the most important change I made was adopting a second dog. I found Luna at a rescue shelter, a 4-year-old German Shepherd mix who'd been returned twice by families who said she was too alert and barked at everything. That sounded exactly like what I needed. Max and Luna bonded immediately, and having both of them in the house made me feel protected in a way the security system never could. It took months before the house started feeling like mine again. I moved my desk to a different room because I couldn't work in the spot where Victor had watched me from above. I rearranged furniture and painted walls, anything to make the space feel different from what it had been. Lily visited every weekend for the first 2 months, and slowly, very slowly, I started sleeping through the night again. The